Let me whisper a secret to you, a secret soaked in rum, gunpowder, and pure terror. Imagine standing on the deck of a merchant ship in the Caribbean, the sun baking your skin, the sea flat as a mirror. You glance to the horizon and see a dark silhouette rising. At first, you think it's just another ship. But then you notice the sails black, ragged, like wings torn from a devil. And then you see him. A man whose beard flows down to his chest, thick and wild like a nest of serpents. But here's the part sailors swore. By this man stuffed slow-burning fuses into his beard and set them alight. The smoke curled around his face, sparks dancing in his eyes, as though his very skull was smouldering from hellfire. In that moment, you weren't looking at a man, you were staring into the face of a demon sent to drag you down into the deep. His name was Edward Teach. The world remembers him as Blackbeard. And while other pirates relied on swords, pistols, or cannons, Blackbeard wielded something far more devastating: fear itself. He understood the darkest truth of the sea, that terror kills quicker than steel. When his ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, bore down on prey, most crews surrendered without firing a shot. They weren't defeated by powder or shot, they were defeated by imagination. And yet, behind the smoke, behind the monstrous mask, there was still a man. A man with hungers, flaws, doubts, and a plan to carve his name into history with flame and shadow. Tonight, I'll tell you how Blackbeard forged a legend not with treasure alone, but by turning himself into a living nightmare. But beware, once you step into this story, it's hard to shake the feeling that he's still out there, watching from behind the veil of smoke. And so, let us begin not with his death, as most tales do, but with the night he first set fire to his beard and discovered the power of terror. The taverns of Nassau whispered of him long before most men had ever seen him. Rum-soaked lips muttered about a tall figure with eyes that gleamed like wet steel and a laugh that could curdle blood. They said he had boarded a French ship and, with barely a shot fired, claimed her as his own, rechristening her Queen Anne's Revenge. Yet the truth was stranger still. He hadn't needed brute force, he needed only to appear. That night in Nassau, Blackbeard, still Edward Teach, to a few sat in the smoky corner of a tavern, listening as lesser men argued about who was bravest, who had killed the most, who had plundered the fattest Spanish galleon. He sipped rum with the calm of a priest sipping sacrament, his dark eyes unreadable beneath the shadow of his tricorn hat. Alonso, an old salt with scars like lightning strikes across his face, leaned close to me and muttered, "Mark my words, boy, he's not the strongest, not the fastest. But when men look at him, they already believe they've lost. That's his witchcraft." The sea was a theatre, and Blackbeard knew it. He wove slow fuses into his beard, soaked them so they smoked but didn't burn, and when battle came, he lit them. Picture it, smoke pouring from his face, sparks spitting from his beard like devils whispering through their teeth, pistols strapped across his chest, cutlass at his hip, a musket slung across his back. He was a walking armory, but it wasn't the weapons that broke men's hearts, it was the sight of him, monstrous, unholy, striding across their decks as though death had chosen a body. The first time he unveiled this horror was off the coast of St. Vincent, a fat merchantman's Spanish crew, carrying cocoa, hides, and silver drifted into sight. Blackbeard ordered no broadside, no hail. Instead, he set fire to his beard. His crew watched in awe as smoke curled upward, as his eyes flashed through the haze. When the merchant crew saw him across the narrowing gap of water, they froze. One man dropped his musket. Another crossed himself. Their captain, white-knuckled at the rail, raised a spyglass, then lowered it with trembling hands. The Spaniards didn't fight. They didn't shout. They surrendered. Not a single drop of blood spilled. The treasure was theirs. But Blackbeard, standing tall in his infernal disguise, had gained something far more precious, a weapon invisible, a reputation that would spread faster than any cannon's roar, as word of his terror travelled. Sailors began to imagine him where he wasn't. A dark sail on the horizon became Queen Anne's revenge. A stranger's laughter in a tavern became Blackbeard's mockery. Mothers warned children that if they didn't sleep, the man with the burning beard would come for them. Yet, as I would learn, even demons carry secrets. And while fear gave Blackbeard his crown, it also painted a target on his back that grew larger with every whisper. Because when you make yourself into a monster, you invite monster hunters to come looking, and the night he realized that it was already too late. The ship was no ordinary prize. When Blackbeard took her, she was a captured French slaver named La Concorde. She had sailed with a belly full of misery, hundreds of chained souls crammed below her decks, the air thick with sweat, blood, and despair. When she limped into Blackbeard's sights in 1717, her crew weakened by disease and hopelessness, Edward Teach saw not just timber and canvas, he saw destiny. Her hull was broad, her decks strong, and she could carry 40 cannons with room to spare. With his hand upon the rail, Blackbeard renamed her Queen Anne's Revenge, a name heavy with spite. For Queen Anne was long dead and her crown forgotten, but in Blackbeard's mouth, the title became a curse against every flag that flew in the Caribbean. I was there when the men painted over the French fleur-de-lis, blacking her sides until she looked less like a ship and more like a shadow pulled across the sea. They strung lanterns along her decks, fitted swivel guns to her rails, and mounted broadsides until her flanks snarled with iron. At night, the lanterns made her glow like a floating city of fireflies, and in daylight her black sails cut the horizon like torn wings. She was not a ship anymore. She was a stage. Mark her lines, Hornigold muttered. The old sea dog whose name still carried weight even after he'd turned semi-gentleman. She's built for more than trade. In his hands she'll be a storm, and she was. From the moment Queen Anne's Revenge prowled the windward passage, merchantman broke at the sight of her. She didn't need to fire. A flag ran up her master Blackfield. A horned skeleton holding a spear aimed at a bleeding heart was enough to hollow men's chests of courage. It was said the skeleton grinned wider with each surrender, though truth and fear are hard to separate once rumors take hold. One morning, off Bermuda, we spotted a fleet of English traders under escort, for ships strong, heavy with sugar and tobacco. The escort, a small frigate, ran up her colours, braced for fight. Blackbeard only smiled, his beard already braided with slow matches, the fuses trailing like serpents waiting to wake. He strode the deck, pistols across his chest, and when the range closed, he lit the fuses. Smoke poured over him, wreathing his head in a halo of brimstone. Run her down. He roared. The crew roared back, and the Revenge surged forward. The frigate fired first, its broadside cracking like thunder. Water plumed near our bow. The crew flinched, but Blackbeard laughed, a low, rolling sound. "Is that all?" He shouted into the wind, and his laughter carried across the gap. The frigate's men faltered. Their captain, pale, gave the order to break. The merchants scattered, sails snapping, and within the hour every one of them struck their colours. Not a shot from us had been fired. The smoke, the legend, the sheer weight of dread did the work of 1,000 guns. That night, the holds of the Revenge groaned with sugar, tobacco, and gold. The men feasted on roasted hog and sang until their throats gave out. Yet Blackbeard did not celebrate. He sat apart, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon. Fear was a weapon. Yes, but a weapon must be sharpened. And he knew that the more men feared him, the more powerful he became. But also, the more men would gather to break him. I remember a night in Nassau, when the tavern was thick with smoke and stories. A young sailor asked him, "Captain, why the fire? Why the smoke? Why the hellfire beard?" Blackbeard leaned close, his face half in shadow, the faint smell of burnt powder still clinging to his whiskers. "Because, boy," he said softly, "men's bodies break slow, but their minds break quick, and a broken mind surrenders faster than flesh." His crew believed it. The merchants believed it. Even the Navy believed it. But behind those words, there was another truth, one I would only understand later. Fear was not just his weapon. It was his shield. For Edward Teach, the man was mortal. But Blackbeard, the demon of smoke and flame, that was eternal. Weeks later, off the Carolinas, we caught a fat Spanish galleon. Her hull sagged with silver, her crew armed to the teeth. They had heard of Blackbeard, of course, but thought themselves brave enough to fight. The Spaniards lined their rails, muskets gleaming, cannon mouths yawning wide. Blackbeard stood silent as the gap closed. Then, with a slow hand, he lit the fuses. The smoke poured, the sparks crackled, and he raised his arms like a priest at mass. "Now," he thundered, "behold your judgment." The Spaniards fired a ragged volley, their muskets shaking in trembling hands. One cannon misfired, bursting on their deck, killing their own men. And in that moment, when the smoke of their mistake mixed with the hellfire curling from Blackbeard's face, their courage snapped. The galleon struck her colours. We boarded her without loss. Holds of silver and spices lay at our feet. But I remember most not the treasure, not the cheers of the men, but the captain of the Spaniards, kneeling on his deck, whispering a prayer with eyes wide, as though the devil himself had come to collect his soul. And perhaps he had. But the more terrifying Blackbeard became, the more his mask consumed him. The smoke, the fire, the spectacle, it began as theatre. But each time he lit his beard, each time men fell to their knees before him, I swear something changed in his eyes. The man Edward Teach began to vanish, swallowed by the monster he had created, and the question we all began to whisper. Quietly, when he was not near, when the mask becomes the face, what happens to the man beneath? For the day would come when Blackbeard's own terror would turn on him. Nassau was not a city. It was a scar. A harbour that had once been respectable under the English flag, abandoned during wars and plagues, then claimed by rogues who turned it into the greatest pirate nest the New World would ever know. The streets were crooked, built from driftwood and stolen stone, lined with taverns that never closed and brothels that never emptied. Rum ran in gutters, pistols cracked without warning, and the only law was the blade in your hand. To outsiders, Nassau was chaos. To men like Blackbeard, it was opportunity. By the time Queen Anne's Revenge swept into the bay, her sails black and her decks heavy with treasure, every soul in Nassau already knew his name. Children shouted it as they chased each other with wooden cutlasses. Tavern keepers whispered it as they counted coins by candlelight. Even other pirates, proud killers in their own right, shifted uncomfortably when his shadow fell across the threshold. He came ashore flanked by 20 men, pistols and cutlasses jangling, his beard still charred from the last fight. The faint odor of gunpowder lingering around him like perfume. People parted, dogs whimpered, and when he walked into the largest tavern on the main street, the horned mermaid of the room fell silent. "Rum," Blackbeard said, and the keeper nearly fell over himself, pouring a whole cask into a pitcher. He drank deep, then slammed the mug down. "Nassau," he boomed, "is mine tonight." The room erupted. Men cheered, women danced, fiddles screeched to life. But beneath the celebration, beneath the pounding feet and the clatter of tankards, I saw the way the other captains glanced at him. Jealousy, fear, a mix of both. For, in Nassau, every pirate was king for a day. But Blackbeard was carving himself into legend, and he knew exactly how to rule. He built his power on fear, yes, but also on cunning. He didn't try to fight every rival captain. He made them allies, then let the alliances rot on their own. He knew when to share plunder, when to lend guns, and when to whisper just enough to set 2 enemies at each other's throats. "A king doesn't need to kill every rival," he once told me. "He just needs to sit back and let them kill each other." But he wasn't content with being king of thieves. No, Blackbeard wanted more. In the spring of 1718, rumors spread that he meant to blockade the whole coast of Charleston. "Madness," the captains said. "Suicidal," the merchants whispered. But Blackbeard did it. With 4 ships under his command, including the dreaded Queen Anne's Revenge, he bottled up the harbor like it was a cask of wine. No ship in, no ship out. He held a city hostage without firing a single shot. The governor of South Carolina panicked. Charleston was rich, fat with trade, and here was one man, one pirate choking its lifeline. The people expected slaughter, but Blackbeard didn't demand silver or gold. He demanded medicine. "Why not coin?" Alonzo asked him, confused, as we stood on the deck watching the blockade. "The city would pay its weight in silver to see you gone." Blackbeard's eyes glinted through the smoke drifting from his beard. "Coin is heavy," he said. "Medicine is power. Men will spend their last coin for life. And a city in fear spreads my name faster than treasure ever could." The governor had no choice. Ships sailed out with chests of medicine. Blackbeard took them, released the prisoners, and vanished. Not a drop of blood spilled, but the whole coast trembled. The merchants wrote letters to London. The governors begged for warships, and the Royal Navy began to murmur his name. But Nassau drank to him. He returned triumphant, his holds crammed not with gold but with respect. Pirates hailed him as the boldest among them. Yet I saw the truth. He was weaving threads tighter and tighter, building a crown not of jewels but of smoke and reputation. Still, every crown grows heavy. One night, in the Horned Mermaid, when the rum had flowed too long and the fiddles had played too loud, I saw Blackbeard slip outside. I followed, quiet, into the alley. There, with the moonlight cutting his face into shadow and flame, he sat alone, his hands shaking. He pulled at his beard, stared at the ground. For a moment, Ed would teach the man emerged. A man burdened by the weight of his own invention. When he noticed me, he snapped back into the monster. He lit the fuses in his beard, sparks hissing, smoke wreathing his head. "Never forget, boy," he said, voice low and dangerous. "The world fears Blackbeard, not Edward. And if I stop being him, They'll tear me apart. I nodded, though my chest tightened with a question I dared not ask. How long could a man wear a mask before it fused to his skin? The answer came sooner than I expected. A message arrived in Nassau. The governor of Virginia, Alexander Spotswood, had declared war on piracy. He had ordered the Royal Navy to hunt Edward Teach to the ends of the earth. For Spotswood knew the truth. Blackbeard was not just a pirate. He was an idea, and ideas are more dangerous than guns. The taverns buzzed. Some pirates cheered, hoping Blackbeard would fall, leaving space for their own crowns. Others cursed, fearing the wrath of England's warships. And Blackbeard, he only smiled, smoke curling from his beard. "Let them come," he said. "I'll give them a show they'll never forget." But in his eyes, just for a flicker, I saw it the man behind the mask, wondering if the storm he'd conjured was finally about to break over his own head. And from that night forward, Nassau was no longer just a kingdom of pirates. It was a throne built on a ticking clock. The beginning of Blackbeard's downfall did not come with cannon fire or a blade to the throat. It came with sand. The shallow, shifting bars of North Carolina, the treacherous shoals where the sea itself seemed to conspire against men would play their part in unmaking the legend. But before the sands claimed Queen Anne's revenge, the first cracks appeared in Nassau itself. For months, the island had been the jewel of piracy. Ships from every nation crowded the bay, their crews spilling into taverns, their holds spilling silver onto gambling tables. But as wealth grew, so did envy. Pirates who once drank from the same barrel began to measure their cups too carefully, and Blackbeard, sitting in his shadowed corner of the Horned Mermaid, felt the weight of every eye upon him. They whispered that he had grown too powerful, that his beard was no longer just smoke and flame, but arrogance that might draw England's full wrath down on Nassau's head. Some captains wanted him gone. Others wanted to challenge him. A few thought to betray him. And then came the wreck in June of 1718. After the Charleston blockade, Blackbeard sailed north with a small fleet. Nassau was too hot, too many knives in too many shadows. So he sought fresh waters near North Carolina, a coast he knew well from earlier voyages. There, he thought, he could carve a quieter kingdom closer to the colonies, yet shielded by shoals that devoured unwary ships. But fate, or perhaps the sea itself, had other plans that was near. Beaufort Inlet, that the Queen Anne's revenge met her doom. The great black-sailed beast, heavy with guns, supplies, and treasure, struck the sandbar with a groan like a wounded animal. The hull shuddered. The masts rattled. Men shouted, hauling lines, tossing ballast, cursing every saint they could name. But the shoals were merciless. The tide fell, and the Revenge leaned hard to starboard, her timbers grinding into sand. I remember the look on Blackbeard's face that day. No smoke, no fire, no theatrics. Just a man, jaw tight, eyes hard, watching as the ship that had carried his legend died beneath him. Cut her free. Hornigold shouted, his boots splashing through shallows as he tried to rally the men. But Blackbeard shook his head. She's gone. His voice was flat, almost gentle. Then, louder, save what you can. Leave the rest. The sea takes her. And so we stripped the Revenge like carrion birds, cannons, powder, food, and treasure ferried to smaller ships. The tide rose, the hull shifted, and the mighty ship that had made merchants tremble became nothing more than splintered wood and broken iron. Some whispered that Blackbeard had run her aground deliberately. that he wanted to scatter the fleet, to rid himself of rivals, to keep the choicest treasure for himself. Others swore it was simple bad luck, but whatever the truth, the result was the same. The revenge was gone, and with her, a piece of the legend. In Nassau, the whispers turned to shouts. He's lost his ship. They jeered. The devil's beard is just smoke after all. Rival captains smelled weakness. Even some of his crew deserted, slipping away to serve other masters. But Blackbeard was not finished. He was too cunning for that. He split his remaining men into smaller crews, scattering across the coast. He forged alliances with corrupt officials in North Carolina, offering bribes in silver and rum. Governor Charles Eden, eager for coin, turned a blind eye to his presence. Papers were forged, pardons granted, and suddenly Blackbeard was a respectable man, at least on parchment. Yet on the water, he remained the same monster. We raided small traders, slipped through inlets, and haunted the sounds like ghosts. But something had changed. The grand theatre of the Queen Anne's revenge was gone. Now our world was marshes, creeks, and villages too small to matter to London, but large enough for Blackbeard to bleed them. He was no longer king of Nassau. He was warlord of the shoals, and in the taverns of the Carolinas, the fear deepened. Farmers whispered that Blackbeard's men came in the night, taking pigs and chickens, demanding supplies, and leaving only the smoke of his beard in the air. Merchants told stories of black sails rising from mist where no ship should sail. Women crossed themselves at the mere mention of his name, but fear cuts both ways. The more he haunted the colonies, the louder the governors cried to London. And one man in particular listened, Alexander Spotswood of Virginia. Spotswood hated pirates. He saw them not as rogues, but as rebels, enemies of crown and order. He read the reports. Charleston blockaded, ships vanished, villages terrified, and he decided Blackbeard must die. Spotswood did not wait for orders. He did not wait for London. He sent word to a young naval officer named Lieutenant Robert Maynard, captain of a small squadron stationed in Virginia. Maynard was ambitious, hungry for glory, and eager to carve his name by slaying the most feared pirate alive. Meanwhile, Blackbeard grew restless. The shoals that protected him also trapped him. Supplies ran thin. Men grumbled. Rum was short, and I could see in his eyes the flicker of the man beneath the mask. He drank harder. He laughed louder. He lit his beard more often, as though the smoke could hide his doubts even from himself. One night, as we sat by a fire on Ocracoke Island, I dared to ask, "Cap'n, why not quit? You have treasure enough. You have pardons. Why not vanish into the world and live as a king?" He stared at the flames, the smoke curling into his beard. Then he said quietly, "Because kings are remembered in books. Monsters are remembered in nightmares, and nightmares last longer." The firelight flickered across his face, and I wondered if he truly believed it, or if he was just too deep in his own legend to crawl out. But fate was already moving against him. Maynard's squadron slipped south, silent, their sails pale in the dawn. The noose was tightening, though none of us yet saw it. And so the man who had blockaded Charleston, who had ruled Nassau, who had turned himself into a demon of smoke and fire, found himself cornered on a narrow island, his ships dwindled, his crew restless, his enemies gathering. The stage was set. The final act of Blackbeard's play was about to begin. And though none of us knew it then, The bloodiest curtain drop in pirate history was waiting just beyond the horizon. The morning of November 22nd, 1718, came soft and golden, the kind of dawn that fools men into believing the sea has forgiven them. The tide whispered against the marshes of a Creek inlet, the water slick as polished glass, the air heavy with the smell of brine and mud. Our campfire from the night before still smoked, a thin grey column rising into the stillness. And there, in the hush, Edward Teach Blackbeard sat, sharpening his cutlass, sparks jumping in rhythm to the rasp of stone against steel. "Today," he said quietly, "we'll either drink by sunset or feed the crabs." We laughed, nervously, because that was the only answer you could give. But inside, every man knew the end was coming. At first light, sails appeared in the distance. White, neat, naval. Lieutenant Robert Maynard's squadron. 2 sloops, light and swift, creeping through the inlet like wolves on the edge of a camp. They flew no colors, but every man on Ocracoke knew what they were. The Crown's answer to Blackbeard's terror. "Let them come," Blackbeard growled. He tied slow-burning matches into his beard, struck them alight, and the smoke curled upward, dark against the morning light. His eyes gleamed through the haze. He strapped pistols across his chests, 6 of them, each loaded, and Prime Dan checked the priming of his musket. The air filled with the bitter taints of powder, the scent of a demon readying for war. Our force was small, barely 20 men, some half-drunk, some hungover, all rough-edged and tired. But when Blackbeard stepped aboard the sloop Adventure, his final command, he carried our fear as if it were his own armor. "Stand firm," he roared, his voice booming over the inlet. "They'll break before we do. They always do." But Maynard was not a merchant captain, not a trembling Spaniard. He had come for one purpose, to end Blackbeard's reign or die trying. The first volley cracked like thunder. Cannons from Maynard's lead sloop roared, iron balls smashing into the Adventure's hull. Wood splintered. Men screamed. Smoke rolled across the water, white against the rising sun. Blackbeard laughed, a sound so deep and ragged it made my stomach twist. "Return fire," he bellowed. Our cannons answered, belching flame and iron. One of Maynard's men vanished in a spray of blood and splinters. Another staggered screaming into the sea. The inlet filled with chaos, smoke choking the air, the sea torn by shot. The cries of dying men mingling with the gulls overhead. Blackbeard strode the deck like a figure from hell. Smoke wreathing his face, pistols gleaming across his chest. He fired, reloaded, fired again, each shot finding its mark. The enemy wavered, their decks littered with bodies. But Maynard was cunning. His lead sloop, riddled and sagging, suddenly slowed, drifting as if crippled. Blackbeard, seeing weakness, grinned through the smoke. "Board her," he roared. "We'll finish them hand to hand." We surged forward, grappling hooks flying, lines tightening as we dragged the sloop close. With a crash, the 2 ships kissed, timbers grinding. Blackbeard vaulted across the gap, cutlass flashing, beard aflame with smoke. We followed, blades clashing, pistols roaring, the deck slick with blood. But Maynard had set a trap. His men, hidden below deck during the cannonade, now poured out like ants from a struck nest. Fresh, furious, armed to the teeth. Suddenly, we were outnumbered 2 to 1. The fight became a slaughter. I remember the chaos in flashes. Blackbeard's cutlass cleaving through a man's musket. Alonzo grappling with 2 sailors, stabbing one before a bayonet took him through the ribs. Blood pooling in the scuppers, the deck trembling beneath boots. And through it all, Blackbeard roared like a beast. He fought with the strength of 10 men, pistols spitting fire, blade hacking, smoke wrapping him in an unholy halo. "Come on then," he howled at Maynard, his voice raw. "Come and meet your devil." Maynard answered with steel. He met Blackbeard at the center of the deck, their blades sparking as they clashed. Blackbeard swung heavy, brutal, each strike shaking Maynard's arm to the bone. But Maynard was quick, precise, darting in and out like a fencer against a hammer. "Yield!" Maynard shouted once, his blade catching Blackbeard's shoulder. Blackbeard only laughed, blood soaking his shirt. "I'll see you in hell first." The duel raged, every eye fixed on them. Blackbeard took a pistol shot to the chest and kept fighting. A cutlass opened his arm to the bone, and he swung harder. They stabbed, slashed, grappled, blood spattering their faces, the smoke of his burning beard curling between them like a veil. "Die, damn you!" Maynard gasped, thrusting his sword deep into Blackbeard's side. But Blackbeard did not fall. He staggered, wrenched the blade free, and swung his cutlass with a roar that shook the deck. Maynard barely ducked, the blade whistling past his head. The men fought on around them. But all of us knew the world had shrunk to these 2 figures. One, a naval officer fighting for order. The other, a pirate king fighting for legend. The end came with smoke and fury. Blackbeard, bleeding from 5 wounds, his chest riddled with lead, still surged forward, his cutlass raised. Maynard fired his pistol point blank into his chest. The shot tore through him. Still he came. Another sailor slashed him across the neck. Still he came. Finally, a volley of musket fire tore into his body. 5 shots, 10 shots, no one knows for sure. He staggered, blood pouring, smoke still rising from his beard. His eyes blazed once more, wild and terrible. Then, at last, his body gave way. He toppled forward, his cutlass clattering against the deck, and Edward Teach Blackbeard fell dead. The deck went silent, save for the groans of the wounded. Smoke drifted. Blood ran in streams. Maynard stood over the fallen giant, chest heaving, his blade slick with gore. It was over, or so we thought. They say it took 20 wounds to kill him, 5 shots, more than a dozen cuts. Some swore he fought on even after his head was severed, his body stumbling across the deck before collapsing. Legends grow quickly on bloody mornings. What I saw was enough. A man too stubborn, too proud, too monstrous to die cleanly. Even in death, he defied the order of the world. Maynard, grim-faced, gave the order. They cut off Blackbeard's head and hung it from the bowsprit, a grisly trophy to prove the demon was slain. His body, heavy with wounds, was cast into the inlet, where the current carried it away. Some swore they saw it swim around the ship 3 times before sinking. Others swore they heard laughter under the waves. The men of Virginia cheered. The Crown celebrated. The governors wrote letters of triumph. The terror of the seas was dead. But for those of us who had sailed with him, who had seen the smoke and heard the roar, we knew the truth. Blackbeard was not gone. He had become something larger. His death was not the end of a man, it was the birth of a legend. And legends, unlike men, do not die. The battle at Ocracoke ended with more blood than victory. Maynard's deck was slick with gore, the groans of the dying echoing against the marshes. Smoke from pistols and slow matches hung low, mixing with the brine and mud until the air itself felt poisoned. Blackbeard lay still at last, riddled with wounds no man could count. Yet even in death, he seemed too large for the deck that carried him. His beard still smoked faintly, as though the fire within refused to admit defeat. Lieutenant Maynard, pale and weary, gave the order that sealed the legend, "Take his head." The sailors moved nervously, for no man wanted to be the one to cross blades with death even after it had fallen. But duty was duty, and soon the grisly task was done. Blackbeard's head, heavy with its famous beard still singed and black, was raised high for all to see. Some cheered, others crossed themselves. I turned away, bile rising in my throat. They slung his head from the bowsprit of Maynard's sloop, a trophy and a warning. It swung there, swelling with each swell of the water, dripping blood into the inlet like an offering. His body, stripped and broken, was cast into the Sound. The current took it, dark and silent, but the story did not end. In Ocracoke village, whispers began before the blood had dried. Some swore they saw his headless body swimming around Maynard's ship, 3 full laps before it sank. Others claimed they heard laughter from beneath the waves that night, a low rumble that carried on the tide. The marshes seemed to echo with phantom footsteps, the smell of smoke lingering when no fire burned. When Maynard sailed north, Blackbeard's head swinging from the bowsprit, the sight froze every port he entered. Merchants gasped, children screamed, women crossed themselves. The authorities in Virginia hailed it as proof that the terror was ended. Governor Spotswood congratulated himself, penning letters to London boasting of the demon's death. But among sailors, the head told a different story. They said his eyes did not dull, that even in death they glared, bright as coals, watching every man on deck. Some swore the beard still smoked when the wind caught it right. At night, the crew of Maynard's sloop refused to go near the bowsprit, muttering that the head whispered in the dark. One man claimed it told him where treasure was buried. Another that it cursed him with visions of fire and drowning. Fear spread faster than triumph. The authorities wanted spectacle. In Williamsburg, Maynard mounted the head on a tall pole by the mouth of the harbour. There it hung for months, rotting under sun and rain, the beard still wild, the sockets empty. Sailors entering the port looked up and felt their stomachs tighten. Merchants swore trade improved. The message was clear. Piracy would be met with death. But the people whispered. Children dared each other to look into the dead eyes, swearing they saw them glow at dusk. Fishermen claimed storms struck harder when the head faced east. Wives muttered that their husbands came home haunted after sailing past it. The crown had meant it as a warning. Instead, it became an idol. Meanwhile, those of us who had once sailed under Blackbeard scattered like gulls before a storm. Some vanished into the colonies, hiding their names. Others tried their luck with smaller ships, only to be hunted down in turn. For me, there was no going back to the sea. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smoke-wreathed face, eyes gleaming through the haze, laughing as cannonballs split the waves, and yet I could not escape him. None of us could dot stories sprouted like weeds in every tavern from Havana to London. Some said Blackbeard had made a pact with the devil, and his soul could not be claimed by heaven or hell. Others insisted he buried treasure along the Carolina coast, marked by strange signs only the initiated could read. A few swore he still sailed on stormy nights, a black ship with flaming lanterns cutting through the mist, his headless body standing at the wheel. Fear did not die with him. it multiplied. Months later, I found myself back in Nassau. The taverns buzzed with fresh names, now Charles Vane, Calico Jack, Rackham, and Bonnie, but whenever men grew too drunk, the talk always circled back to him. Maynard killed the man, one sailor muttered into his cup, but the sea kept the monster. Another spat and swore he'd seen the ghost ship himself, sails black as midnight. A figure at the prow, with sparks flying from his beard, though no head crowned his shoulders. The laughter that followed was nervous, never full. For deep down, even the boldest pirate knew, Blackbeard's terror was not gone. It was eternal, and here's the strangest twist of all. Years later, divers in the Carolinas swore they found remnants of the Queen Anne's Revenge buried under shifting sand. Rusted cannon, broken timber, shards of glass bottles. But in the muck, one man claimed he saw something glint a length of fused iron, twisted as though burned in unnatural fire. When he pulled it free, it smelled faintly of smoke. He dropped it and fled, leaving it for the sea. So what became of Blackbeard's head? History says it rotted on that pole until it fell, swallowed by time. But legends say otherwise. Some claim the governor kept it, locked in a chest, afraid to destroy it. Others whisper it was taken to England, displayed in secret chambers of the Admiralty as a warning to officers. And the sailors, the ones who still tell his story under starlight, they swear the sea reclaimed it, returning it to the body that still walks the ocean floor. What I know is this: when storms roll in from the east, and the waves turn black beneath the lightning, I hear laughter in the thunder, laughter deep, ragged, laughter that no grave, no pole, no cannon shot could silence. Blackbeard is dead, but Blackbeard lives. Edward Teach, the man, died on a bloody deck at Ocracoke Inlet, but Blackbeard, the nightmare born of fire and smoke, never died. His mask outlived the flesh beneath it. Children still whisper his name, divers still search for his treasure, and sailors still swear his ghost sails in every storm. That is the true power of fear. Swords rust, ships sink, men rot, but terror endures.